Hi and welcome back to Writer's Block. I am your local undead vampire, and so in the spirit of Halloween today I'm going to be talking about a few of the horror books that I have read. First is It by Stephen King. This is probably the first horror that I actually read. It's also the first Stephen King I read. It's a very nice, super floppy book. You can pretty much... this one actually... I did really like this one. I'm sure you all know what it is about, so I don't need to tell you. I did really like this one. I did find it creepy and horrifying. My main issues were pretty much the same as most people had, having been the scene at the end between the kids in the tunnels, and also the very end, which Stephen King is known to be bad at endings. Overall, I think I gave it like 4.5 stars. I did really enjoy it, and I think if you're new to horror or new to Stephen King, it's probably a very good book to start with. Another really famous horror book that I've read is The Island of Dr. Moreau by H.G. Wells. This is a really nice cover. This is a really nice copy of this book. It is the SF Masterworks edition. So it's got a face of like a leopard and a man kind of morphing together. This is a classic, so I'm sure most of you do know it. Or you've probably like seen the Simpsons episode or something. A man is saved from a shipwreck by a strange vessel carrying a bunch of weird animals and people that he doesn't recognise, and they take him to this island, which is run by Dr. Moreau. There's a bunch of people there who act very strangely, and he's not. And they seem very weird and animalistic. It's kind of like, are they human or are they man? And what is Dr. Moreau actually up to? I was quite surprised when I was looking for books in this video that I found out this was actually classed as a horror. I didn't find it horrifying at all or thrilling. I do like it, but it's not in any way horrifying. It's not scary at all. I just found it, personally I would think it would be more just basic sci-fi than horror at all. It is still, in saying that it is, as I said, a very good book still. So the next book is another Stephen King one, which is The Tsar of Bad Dreams, which is a collection of horror short stories. So I actually listened to the audiobook of this instead of reading this physical copy. And the stories that are in the audiobook are actually slightly different to the ones that are in the physical copy of the book, as well as the ones that are in the Kindle are slightly different to the ones in the audio and the physical copy. For instance, there's a book that Stephen King wrote as a promotion for Kindles that is not in the physical copies, but was available in the Kindle ones and was available as the audiobook. For the most part, I enjoyed every story in here. I think the one that was the least disappointing was about a husband and wife going to the supermarket and the wife having a heart attack. That I found very dull and boring. The one that I found the absolute creepiest was Bad Little Kid. It's creepy. But for that one to really describe why it's creepy, it would kind of be a spoiler. But overall, they are all very good stories, ranging from downright scary to creepy in terms of disgusting, like how you get those scenes in Dreamcatcher, to scary as in it kind of scary. The next book is one that I've read more recently, which is Midwinter Blood by Marcus Sedgwick. And so Midwinter Blood by Marcus Sedgwick is a book that's separated into 7 different parts, told in different time periods, going back from really archaic, like 10,000 years ago, to actually slightly in the future. It's pretty much about these two lost souls who keep finding each other over and over again on this really remote island. And it's kind of like, who are they? How did they connect in past lives? And also, what's this mysterious aspect around the island? Because when the first story you get is this gentleman's going to the island because he's told to report on the fact that no one ever is born on the island, there's no kids, and the fact that no one ever ages on the island either. The book is actually based on a painting called Midwinter Blood by Swedish painter Carl Larsson. It was very controversial at the time, and it was actually rejected by the museum who commissioned it. The painting does actually depict the Nordic myth that the book ends up expanding on and is based on as well. Overall, for that book, it was very intriguing. It's a very fast-paced book. It is very clear how the characters are joined together, though in some of them, their relationship, considering that it originally started out as being a romantic relationship, particularly there's one storyline in which they're mother and son, so that's kind of disturbing. But overall, the story is not particularly horrifying. It does have some, obviously, mythological aspects. It does actually include vampires. is not. It's more of a thrilling tale than a horrifying tale, and I ended up giving it a 4 stars. The book is quite vague throughout, which is quite common for most Suzak's books. So pretty much, if you are okay with that, you'll like this book. But if you're not the kind of person who needs definitive answers by the end of the book, it's not the book for you. The next book is probably my favourite of the horror books today. It is The Nest by Kenneth Opel. This is actually a middle grade horror. But if you look at the Goodreads reviews, people are generally quite angry about the fact that it was marketed as a middle grade. Because, well, people talk about Coraline by Neil Gaiman being too creepy for kids. This is a lot worse. It is illustrated throughout, and it has some rather creepy illustrations. They're not well defined or anything, but they're just disturbing. They're also it's kind of like the way they're drawn, black and white kind of charcoal-y sketches kind of add to the disturbing nature. That's creepy. Real creepy. So this book deals with a 9-year-old boy called Stephen, whose little brother, baby brother, who's recently been born, is very sick, and his parents are very anxious about if he's going to survive or if what's his life going to be like as he grows up. Steve himself actually suffers from severe anxiety, and that is talked about quite a lot in this book, and it's depicted really well. And he does actually go to therapy in here, which I think is actually a very good thing to show kids that their mental health is serious and they should seek help. But in saying that, if your kid has anxiety, or if you're a parent of a sick child, this book probably won't be for you, as it is very disturbing. So what happens is there is a wasp nest that grows in a garden, and one night when Steve's asleep, he gets visited in his dreams by the queen wasp. She says that she can fix his brother, make him absolutely perfect. They won't have to worry about anything ever again, and it'll be great. And all he has to do is say yes to this. The bee is very ominous and doesn't give any details about how she's going to do this, what's going to happen. And it's kind of is Steve's anxiety getting the best of him? He's actually hallucinating. This is actually just, none of it's real, and it's just a manifestation of his anxieties about the health of his little brother. Or is these wasps really out there and they are actually trying to help him? Or are they real, but they're actually evil? At the same time, there is this disturbing man who drives by their house selling knives, and for some reason, despite the fact that he's a little kid, their parents let him hang out with this guy and don't think it's weird at all that there's a random man driving around town selling knives door to door. This man ends up having a link to the wasps in a surprising way, and it's kind of like the people who think that the villains aren't actually the villains, they're actually the good guys. So it is the most disturbing book I've read on this pile. If you've got a fear of wasps or bees, you're not going to like this. It's going to make it a whole lot worse. But if you don't have that, this is a great book. You should read it. The most disturbing part, however, is what comes out at the ending and the reveal about the man with the knives and the wasps. Overall, really, I would suggest your children don't actually read this. More, you read it yourself. It would be very much, if you did classify it as middle grade, it would be very much higher middle grade, not 8-year-olds, more like 12 to 14-year-olds. But even then, a lot of teenagers, if you look at Goodreads, have been disturbed by this. A lot of parents on Goodreads have talked about how they had nightmares reading this. So, even though it's middle grade, probably shouldn't read to children. Now, from going from one of my favourite horrors to my most disappointing horror is Night Flyers by George R. R. Martin. This is a bind-up of various tales. So it has Night Flyers Override, Weekend in a Kill Zone, 7 Times Never Kill Man, More Than Many Coloured Fires of the Starring, and The Songs of Liar. Most of those stories are either just thrillers, not really horrors. Night Flyers is one that is outright horror, and it's actually the worst story in this collection. It's actually the worst piece of writing I've ever read from George R. R. Martin. It's very mediocre to straight up bad. The TV show, which a lot of people didn't like, is actually better than the original story, though it is also very different. But pretty much the ways they've made it different made it better, because the original story was very bland and quite boring. And saying that, the very last story, which is actually one of his most famous short stories, The Song of Liar, is a whole lot more creepier. It's not set out to be a horror, but when you find out what's going on in this town, on this alien planet that these two researchers have gone to investigate, it is very fucked up and creepy and disturbing. But it's made in a way that's very cultish, and in that the way it's creepy is that it's very reminiscent of a lot of cults and how they work and how they isolate people from their community and then pretty much brainwash them. But in this case, it's aliens. I think overall I gave this book a 3 stars, but if Night Flies wasn't it, I probably would have given it a 4 stars to 5 stars. Sorry, my camera died. I'm back now. Apparently I look scarier if I wear this. So the next book is Cable by Clive Barker. This is about a man who's... I can't remember if it's paranoid schizophrenia or just some other psychotic mental illness. But he is convinced that he is a serial killer, because there's been a serial killer going around killing a bunch of people, and he's convinced that and worried that he might be that person. His psychologist convinces him that he probably is that person and that he should probably hand himself into the police. While he goes out on his trip home from the psychiatrist's office, he ends up in this remote town in a cemetery in the middle of the night, and he wants to kill himself, but he ends up getting attacked by these monsters. Ends up finding that underground, under the cemetery, there's this whole community of monsters, of people who aren't, like, they're not ever really given a name. It's like some of them kind of look like werewolves, others more vampires, some of them just dead people that aren't dead. But they don't want him in the community because they don't want people finding out about where they are, because they don't want to be persecuted or whatnot. But he's still convinced he's a serial killer, and his girlfriend is convinced he's innocent. And so it's kind of about him coming to terms with whether he's a monster or not, and him battling the police for them to try and get justice for the crimes that he's committed, and finding out what this mysterious town is, really. In terms of creepiness, this is probably one of the creepier books on this list. It's definitely in terms of imagery. There is a very disturbing sex scene, because the main character dies, right? And then he comes back to life as like an undead, like a zombie. And about 2/3 through the book, once he's dead and is a corpse, his girlfriend has sex with him. And they describe his cold corpse, and it's quite disgusting. I think I gave this a 3.5 stars in the end. In terms of horror, it is very much higher horror levels than all of the other books on this list. It doesn't give much of an explanation as to who the community is. It does allude to some folklores, but it doesn't actually give a concrete explanation of what happened to him, who these people are, who this mysterious entity that runs the town is. So if you're looking for a creepy, horrific novel that isn't so much as spine-chilling, but disturbing in its imagery and disturbing in what happens, the next book is a YA short story collection called Slasher Girls and Monster Boys. It's done by a bunch of different authors. Just have a look see, actually. It's edited by April Genevieve DeColt. It has stories from Lee Bardugo, Mary Lou, Megan Shepherd, Kat Winters, Jay Kristoff. As far as I can remember from reading that book, I liked pretty much every single story. They were all pretty horrifying and scary. Obviously they're short stories, so they pack a punch in very short amount of pages, so they don't have time to build up much suspense. And the one that really stands out for me is, I can't remember who wrote it, but there's a story about a girl who comes back from the dead for the sole purpose of killing who's killed by a serial killer, whose sole purpose as coming back to the dead is to kill another serial killer who's also killing these girls. And then when she does that, the last victim of him, will come alive and go on to kill another serial killer. So they're kind of avenging one another. I gave that one a 4 stars. It's a book that I read it from the library, but it's very much a one that I've actually liked to own, so I could reread the stories. As I said, I did like all the stories, but that's the one I could actually remember well enough, which isn't necessarily a sign that I didn't like them or it's a bad thing, because I know I did like them. I remember reading it and it's just they haven't, because they were so short, a lot of them haven't left that big of an impact, so I'd like to read them again. No copy. Next is Annihilation by Jeff Vandermeer. This is actually the movie cover, which, as movie covers go, this is actually pretty nice. I'm sure most of you have seen the movie. So, secret CIA or government operation, in which a woman whose husband is part of that operation, he mysteriously turns up after being missing for months. She doesn't get told that he's back, he just suddenly turns up at her door acting very strangely. And she decides that she's going to go on a mission as well and find out what's happening. So it ends up getting into the Area X, where all these mysterious things are happening, where there's like a barrier around the area. Animals are mutating, people are just dying out. There's weird radioactivity. Is it aliens? Is it supernatural? Is it just, well, what the hell is it? A lot of people find this imagery in this very, very disturbing. Particularly the parts where she's in the tunnel that she has to walk down the numerous steps. There is quite a lot of differences between the movie and the book. The movie makes the imagery look kind of picturesque and actually nice compared to this, whereas this is more grotesque and vomity. Particularly the tunnel, which there is a lot of descriptions of these, which seem like fungal growths on the walls of the staircase, and how they're like pulsating, pretty much talking to her, and like vomit like growths all over the place, and how they're getting bigger and bigger, and like surrounding claustrophobic nature of it. So a lot of people found it too disgusting to like it, to like this book. It doesn't end with an explanation as to what the hell happened. There is obviously more books in the series. As far as I'm aware, at no point does a concrete explanation actually happen, but the general understanding from readers is that it is an alien thing. However, the next books don't actually follow the main character in here, as pretty much what happened to her husband and how he got affected by what happens in Area X happens to her, so she kind of becomes other. I think I rated this 3.5 or 4 stars. I rated it 4 stars. Next book is, and pretty much all of them deal with stuff that's underneath, like whether it be literal in the ground underneath or underneath your skin and whatnot. And so a lot of it is very much, the horror is very heavily based on imagery. Like the kind of horror and imagery that does make you cringe and like go, but it also, by the end of the book, there is a lot of repetition in the imagery, so you kind of get desensitized to it. And so it did seem kind of like the author had run out of ways to describe something, or just hadn't yet come to a concrete way to describe what she was trying to get to, and so she kept trying to re-explore the same idea. Most of these do involve body horror, but also body horror in terms of psychological and how that's impacting, how that's also like their physical states manifesting physically into their body. So if you're a fan of gore and whatnot, this would be for you. I think I gave this 3.5 stars, and I liked it, but I also feel like by the end it was pretty much same old. It kept being redone and over again. So I feel like some of the stories should have been revisited and explored in different ways. Next book is another book that I read quite recently, which is White Tears by Henry Kunzru. So this story is about two friends, one who comes from a very privileged background, who comes from a lot of wealth, but is kind of black sheep in his family. He's like a hippie, alter culture person, and then the other guy comes from more of an average middle class, working class background, but is very much the loser and a weirdo in his society, in his group of friends, and a lot of people don't understand why the elite person is even friends with him. What it is, they end up creating a music business together, with Seth, the awkward one, being the main talent of the business, with Carter being the rich one, being one who provides the finances for it, but also more the charisma of actually getting the clients. And part of what Seth does to create the music is he goes out and records sounds from around New York City. And then one day when he's out there, he accidentally records a man singing, but when he looks back through the footage, he finds that it's not just got the man singing, it's got all the instrumental as well with it. And it's also like a very emotional song, and it seems like it was this great piece of music they've just suddenly stumbled upon, and it sounds very authentic to the old jazz eras, and so they kind of play with it and put it online, pretending that it's this lost record that's like an antique that's worth a whole lot of money, and they've accidentally found it, and it creates a whole lot of buzz. And then this one guy gets to talk to them and claims that the guy that the song they heard is a legitimate song, and that the guy they made up, the name of the person they made up, the story behind him that they made up for this music is actually real. And then both of them, in their own separate ways, kind of become obsessed over this music. It kind of starts degrading their mental health, and it consumes pretty much their whole waking life. And we pretty much find out that is this song a real song, and is the person who they created actually a real person. It ends up being a bit of a ghost story, and a bit of a revenge ghost story, in that you find that people who previously discovered the song accidentally have been murdered or died in very mysterious ways. And so like when they meet up with the guy who commented on their website saying this guy's real, he was like, you need to get rid of it, it's bad, like you're gonna die. The more they get obsessed with the song and finding out if it is real or not, the more paranoid they both become, and like their psyche starts to degrade, and the writing of the story ends up flowing with that, in terms of it mixes in different timelines of the possible history of the guy with other possible histories of what happened, and it's kind of like which one's true, which one's not, and also then what's happening to Seth in today's time, present time. It's not sure what is happening, what he's just imagining, what he's dreaming about, because we do know that he has some mental health issues. It's not delved in very deeply about that, but he starts to think he's just losing his mind. So it's more of very much a psychological thriller, but it also very heavily deals with race and pretty much how the music industry was built in America, and pretty much how a lot of industries that built in America and how they were built on the backs of slaves and oppressed people, and they were just a lot of people who were fundamental to creating a lot of the industries within America have just been forgotten about and erased through history. As far as I gave this book a 5 stars. It's a very quick read. It's not horrifying, but it is very compelling. It's more thrilling. It's trying to figure out what is real and what's not. But obviously the ghost aspect to it, and having it be a vengeful, murdering ghost, does bring in the horror aspect of it. Last book is Her Body and Other Parties by Carmen Maria Machado. This is a short story collection again. The one that really stood out to me is Husband Stitch, which I did not even realise husband stitching was a thing. And now I do know, and it's disgusting. And to think that that's actually still a practice that happens today. It still does happen, and it happens quite a lot in the US. Most of the stories in here are feminist or queer-based. So if those are subjects that are important to you, and you feel strongly about, this would actually be much more impactful and horrifying to you. as, well, frankly, I would feel like the husband stitch should be horrifying to anyone to find out that people actually do that. I gave this 5 stars. Pretty much every story is in its own different way creepy and not horrifying in the way that you'll stay up late at night having nightmares, but in the way you'll be disgusted that those are genuine way people think and act. But yeah, these are fictionalizations of it, and these have some fantastical elements to it, but people are generally like this. That is what's horrifying about this. So anyway, this actually has, out of all these books, actually had the most impact considering its roots in reality and the fact that what it draws its horror from are real things. So that is all the books I have for you two today. Next, I'm going to do a list of horror and thrillers that I am anticipating, that I am looking forward to reading. But that is all for today. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Links to my Instagram, Twitter, and our website down below, along with our Patreon if you feel like donating to us. And I look forward to seeing you next time.